Hello, it's good to know you are here. The more we know about someone or something, the more likely we are to nurture it and protect it, whether that's an idea or a person or a system or a salmon. This is likely why most of us are here tonight. It's why I am here tonight. I am Carly Rose, the Community Engagement Manager with the Environmental Science Center, or ESC for short. ESC is a nonprofit in Burien, Washington, and we are committed to increasing environmental stewardship. We help people learn about their natural surroundings so they can cherish them and protect them. That is the hope of this lecture series. We aim to have 2 speakers in 3 different sessions, and you can write in questions so that I can then ask this of our speakers. You can write these in throughout the presentations that are going on, and I'll ask questions at the end. And we hope to have some really good discussions in this format. We are thankful that the city of Burien has sponsored these presentations this month. This occurred last year at a community center, and we are happy to still try to do that in this format. We are here to inform you about watershed issues, stormwater management tools, and other stewardship practices and tips, and to just further appreciate these natural treasures that we have. Seahurst Park, Puget Sound, the marine life that are all within it, these are just some of those treasures. They have been treasured by the indigenous people of this land since time immemorial. And we want to recognize that we are currently on the unceded ancestral land of multiple Coast Salish tribes. Here at the Environmental Science Center, we mostly work in South King County, and that is on land that was primarily used by the Duwamish tribe. So we want to honor this land and all that is within it. We want to honor all the tribal members of the past, those who are very much alive today, and those who are coming in the future. And we are especially grateful for these native storytellers, these scientists, these educators, these conservationists who continue to uplift their culture and the environmental communities around us. That is also one of the goals tonight. We are here to inform and to uplift. We all live within a watershed, and we can have a positive or a negative impact by assessing its health and assessing our own behaviors. A watershed is an area of land where all the water drains off of it and goes to one area, one place. It could be a stream, it could be a river or a lake. It's usually named after that large body of water. So you could be joining us from the Puget Sound watershed or the Cedar River watershed, or you can be in a different state or in a different country, which is really exciting that there are all these watersheds surrounding us, but kind of come together and bring us all together. So again, that's why we are here, to learn about our watershed and things that we can do in it from our really great speakers. Tonight's presentation is Actions for Marine Life. Talking about watersheds, we have to talk about aquatic life. So we're going to learn about what's happening in our watersheds on a local level, on a regional basis, and discover ways that we can get into the action within them. And sometimes we can just do this from home. We're first going to hear from Dr. Simone Roches, who works with the University of Washington, and then from Kelly Steffen, who works with the Environmental Science Center. Simone is first going to share the ways that researchers at the University of Washington are engaging with communities around Puget Sound to monitor shoreline restoration. We will discover some early data on the impacts of the restoration projects in Seahurst Park specifically. Plus, we'll learn how to get involved in monitoring efforts and contribute to science. Simone is currently working with UW's wetland ecosystem team to study urban shoreline restoration with community science groups across Puget Sound. So she is certainly happy to take some of your questions tonight. So with that, I hope you welcome Simone Roches.
And I'm just getting set up here to share a portion of my screen. So just give me 1 minute to do that. Oh, hold on. It's not coming this time. Hold on a second. View.
No worries. At least you have some interesting things.
There we go. Do you all see it? Awesome. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for that introduction. Good evening. My name is Simone de Roches, and I'm a researcher at the School of Aquatic and Fishery Sciences, excuse me, at the University of Washington. And tonight I'm going to tell you a little bit about restoration and monitoring at your beloved Seahurst Park, as well as across the Puget Sound region. Oops. Helps to know how to advance slides. So just before I get started, though, I wanted to generally define what I mean by restoration. So in an ecological sense, what this means is returning habitats that may have been negatively impacted by humans back to their natural state. So in shorelines across Puget Sound, this often involves removing armoring. So what do I mean by shoreline armoring? Well, you might have seen this very region right here in this picture. This is actually right at Seahurst Park, some armoring right at Seahurst Park. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what the purpose of armoring is. What does armoring look like? And why do we need to remove it for restoration purposes? Okay, so what is the original purpose of armoring? Why did we put it there to begin with? Well, generally speaking, armoring was put in place to prevent erosion on the shoreline. So it basically enables construction and urbanization right up to that shoreline. And in some cases, it really improves beach access, like for boats and constructing boat ramps, for example. And what does armoring look like? Well, you've probably seen armoring before, especially given that 30% of the Puget Sound nearly is armored, which amounts to nearly 700 kilometers of shoreline. So you've probably seen armoring before. Usually this takes the form of things like seawalls and bulkheads, as you can see in this picture here, but can also be in the form of something called riprap, which is basically human-placed stones and rocks and other material that also acts to retain sediments. Okay, so armoring sounds like it serves some useful functions, but what's the problem with it? And therefore, why are we removing it? Well, armoring means that less beach wrack, and what I mean by beach wrack is seaweed and all this debris that we see that comes up and deposits on shorelines. Less of that is deposited. It also means that there are fewer beach logs and therefore less habitat for different animals, for example, insects and other invertebrates. One of the big problems with armoring is that it lowers terrestrial aquatic connectivity. And what I mean by this is that there's less nourishment and less nutrients that are basically deposited on the beach from this beach rack, from all that seaweed, and less debris like leaves and branches and all that sort of stuff from trees in the terrestrial environment. So there's less connectivity, less exchange of nutrients between these two, the marine and the terrestrial environment. And this can even affect the cycling of nutrients on a global scale. So that means that armoring of shoreline can actually affect our global cycling of carbon and other nutrients. So just to show you a pictorial example of why wrack can't be deposited on beaches, we have a picture here that shows armoring and water going right up and basically breaking at that armoring on the shore. And this basically means that when the tide recedes, wrack can't be deposited on the beach, and it's left floating in the ocean. If we remove that armoring, we can see that as the tide recedes, we actually have wrack and other debris that can be deposited where the tide recedes in the intertidal zone in the ocean or on the beach shore. This is similar to with logs, where we have logs that stay floating in the ocean and can't basically make landfall when the tides recede because of this big armoring area in the way. And similarly, logs are left behind on the beach if we remove this armoring. And of course, this is really important because it creates habitat for animals, places for birds to sit and lizards to hide and insects to burrow. And of course, most importantly, maybe a sitting place for humans to enjoy the beach. So again, armor is not suitable, is not a suitable habitat for a number of different species. Some species can use the armor like barnacles and mussels, but there are a great number that can't actually use this really homogeneous or this really simplified habitat. So again, if we move that armor, we get more of this structure, more of this vegetation for lots of different animals to take shelter. Once armor is removed, often restoration also involves things like planting of native trees and other plants, grasses and shrubs, and this actually stabilizes the sediment. And this is an alternative to armoring and basically creates what we call a living shoreline. And this is what we hope to do through restoration, is create these natural living shorelines instead of basically big retention walls that kind of inhibit and cause detriments to our natural beaches. Okay, so you might have been around when some of the restoration actually happened at Seahurst Park, and I'll go into that in a little bit more detail in a bit. But you might have noticed that restoration is actually can be kind of a destructive process at first, not always though. So this is basically a restoration effort that's occurring up at Bowman Bay and Deception Pass. And you can see this actually involves the removal of a bunch of trees, which might otherwise fall down when the armoring wall is removed. This is a much more classic photo of restoration, and this is armoring being removed at your very own Seahurst Park. Okay, so how are we monitoring the effectiveness of this restoration across Puget Sound and specifically at Seahurst Park? So we partner with organizations and community scientists to monitor shoreline restoration at over 100 sites in the Puget Sound. And over half of these are actually areas where armoring has been removed and the shoreline has been restored. So this is just a map of some of our sites here. Before I explain the protocols and show you some of the data, I want to show you photos of the 3 different types of sites that we have. And these are, again, photos from Seahurst Park. So our natural locations, these are areas where which have never been armored, so they never needed to be restored. And these serve as controls for us to compare restoration effectiveness to. We have armored areas like this one in the middle, which shows a seawall. It could also be riprap. And then finally, we have restored areas where armor has been removed, and often other restoration efforts like planting of trees and whatnot have often occurred. Okay, so what are we monitoring to show restoration effectiveness across these sites? Well, we have a lot of different protocols for measuring different biological and physical responses across these different sites. This is just an example of a few of them here, but we have lots more on our website, which I'll show a connection to later. For the purposes of my talk today, I'm just going to be talking about these 3 different response variables: Btrack, insects, and logs, because we have most data on these particular things right now. Okay, so I want to first talk about how we take these measurements. Our first step is usually to lay down this 50-meter transect parallel to the shoreline. And this is the transect across which we're going to be measuring our different variables. To measure Btrack, we use this 1 foot by 1 foot square grid of 25 squares, and this aids us in approximating the percentage of rat cover on the shoreline. So we also record things like the type of algae or whether the rack is terrestrial, so leaves and branches, or marine, so like algae and seaweed in origin. To count logs, we lay another transect, this time perpendicular to that first transect, and we basically just count the number of logs that cross this transect. So these are, we also record the size of the different logs and the different things that are growing on them, like barnacles or even grasses and small saplings. For insects, we actually leave this tub with a little bit of soap and water overnight. We call this a fallout trap, and this basically collects insects through a 24-hour period. We then can filter these and take them back to the lab and count the number of insects and identify them. Okay, so without further ado, let's look at some of the data for some of these responses. And these, I want to say, I'm responsible for analyzing and plotting a lot of these data here. So, and I basically finished the analysis of these data just over the weekend. So these are very new data, and my partner has only just seen them basically. So these are very, very fresh, and they're really cool results, and you are some of the first ones to see them. So just letting you know how special you are. So this first graph is just for Btrack, and it basically shows, like I said, the percentage of Btrack cover on the y-axis here across our 3 different types of sites. So our armored site, our restored, and our natural site. And this, again, this is for an average across all the sites across Puget Sound. So for example, that restored bar there, that's an average across 50 sites. So I'll zoom in on Seahurst in a little bit. So I want to highlight here that Btrack is one of the first things to come back after an area has been restored. As we might expect, the armored site has very little Btrack along it, very low percentage of cover. But our restored and natural sites are pretty comparable. Our restored site is even more than natural in some cases. So this is pretty interesting. If we look at beach logs, we see, as expected, these logs take a little bit longer to settle on the beach. A little bit longer to accumulate. They don't necessarily just come with each tide. So first of all, as expected, again, we have very few logs at our armored site, and we have a large number of logs at our natural sites, with moderate levels at our restored sites. So we can see some improvement here. Finally, for insects, we see, and this is the number of different insect families. So this is a measure of diversity. It's not just the total number of insects overall. Diversity is a really important component of ecosystem health. So here we have insect diversity showing much higher levels at our natural sites, with moderate levels at our restored sites and the lowest levels at our armored sites. So insects start to colonize after we get these habitats being more established. Okay, so how does this compare to your beloved Seahurst Park and the restoration efforts that have occurred there? Well, Seahurst Park is a really interesting site because we not only have 1, but 2 restoration areas that have occurred that have been restored in the past several years. So this is basically a map, just a screen cap of Google Maps here, showing our 2 restored sites, one which had armor removed in 2005, and the other that had armor removed in 2014. And if you've lived in the area for a long time, you might actually remember seeing this armor being removed. I haven't, I only moved to Seattle last year. So I didn't get a chance to see what it looked like before, but I do have some pictures. We also have a unrestored or still armored site in the north here, and a natural site which was never armored in the south. And here's just some pictures if, like me, you didn't get a chance to see what these photos or what these places looked like before they were restored. We have the site that was restored in 2005 at the top, and the one restored in 2014 on the bottom. And so on the top, we can see that the armoring used to be this kind of rip-rap with like kind of a rock wall. And then you can hardly see it, but in the bottom left-hand corner, there's actually an armored wall that goes along the side or the middle of that photograph. You can see also the restoration that took place. This often involved, as we can see in 2015, the placement of logs and the planting of vegetation. And with this most recent photo from last year, we can see that vegetation has really come back in a large way. Okay, so again, like I started to say, Seahurst Park is has experienced more than just armor removal. It's also experienced things like beach nourishment, which basically means the placement of sediments and nutrients on the beach itself, and the addition of logs, as well as the planting of native vegetation. And this all basically just jumpstarts the ecosystem on the shoreline here. Okay, so here are some data from Seahurst Park. And like I said, I've just been analyzing these data last week. So the mystery of Seahurst Park is yours to share, is mine to share with you today. Again, here we have the Btrack logs and insects. And just like we saw with the average across all the sites, the armored sites have lower levels of all three of these variables. The fewest logs, the least Btrack cover, and the lowest diversity of insects. Again, we see that natural sites typically have more rack, a higher number of logs, and higher insect diversity. And like I said, what's special about Seahurst Park is we have 2 restoration sites to compare. And much like we'd expect, the site that was restored back in 2005 has had more time to accumulate more rack and a larger number of logs on the beach. And we see something interesting happening with insect diversity here. And because I've just been analyzing these data to prepare to show to you this week, I actually don't know really what's going on here. It's kind of interesting because the 2014 restored site has a much higher level of insect diversity, as you can see here, than all the other sites. And that's pretty interesting. I don't know what's going on here, and I really have to look and see whether there are other variables like the types of plants that were planted, or whether that's an area where there's an aquatic habitat nearby or something like that. So this is really interesting data. I'm not sure what's causing it, but there could be something cool going on. Okay, and there you go. Sorry, same slide. And just for reference here, this is how Seahurst compares to the other sites across Puget Sound. So you can see it's pretty comparable, pretty similar to those other sites as well. And there's a lot of variation in a lot of these different sites that these averages on the right don't really capture. For example, there are lots of other things like which direction the shoreline is facing, how much human use it experiences, the type of restoration that can all contribute to variation in these data. So that's why it's really important to look at a site like Seahurst in particular to see what's going on. One of the other special things about Seahurst that I didn't tell you is that I was only showing you data from 2016. And Seahurst is actually super special because we have a great depth of data from it. We've continuously been monitoring these response variables at Seahurst Park for over the last decade or more. So some of these response variables we can actually track through time. And at the 2014 site, for example, we can even see how this site has changed after restoration. And so I've got a dotted line there to show basically when that restoration happened. So I failed to explain to you that here on these figures, we have the sampling year or time on the x-axis, and we have, again, the different sites represented by color. So gray represents our armored sites, blue are restored, and green are natural. And I want to point out to you in these figures is that there's a lot of variation in these sites through the different years. And but especially I want to point out that these gray points, these armored sites show quite a bit less of this variation. In general, we still have lower levels of all three variables, even though there's a bit of variation. We see much more variation in the restored and natural sites, the green and blue lines. And this is kind of as we might expect. There's still a lot of variation from year to year, depending on whether there's an El Nino event, whether there's a lot of rain, and all that other stuff. Okay, so just to conclude here, I want to re-emphasize why Seahurst Park is such a special place for us to measure restoration. First of all, it has over 10 years of data, so we can really track that restoration effectiveness over time. It also has 2 locations that were restored at different times. So we can actually track and compare how long certain biological variables take to respond. And lastly, not all our sites are public sites. Seahurst Park is a public area where everyone can benefit from our restoration efforts. You can go and sit down on the logs and observe all the different birds and everything that are attracted to our newly restored areas. Finally, as I mentioned earlier, we and in the Westland Ecosystem team, as part of our shoreline monitoring, rely on volunteer community scientists to help collect our data for our database. So if the protocols that I described, like counting logs and Btrack, seemed like they might be fun for you and really accessible, they're pretty easy. I've gone down and done them myself. Then I'd encourage you to check out our website that was just revamped yesterday, or it was revamped over the last few months, but it was just put live yesterday. And so you can check out that website. It's got all my illustrations and some of my data, but not the stuff from Seahurst yet. And you can also reach out to either myself or my colleague, Jason Toft, who is really the mastermind behind all this, all the wetland ecosystem team and the shoreline monitoring database. So with that, I'd like to thank my collaborators, the website team, and the field crew, and our funders. And these have all contributed to our large efforts. Oh, and of course, our community scientists who have contributed to our efforts in collecting shoreline monitoring restoration data over the last several years. And thank you so much.
Now, thank you. I think there's a collective thank you that we can't hear at the moment because this is a special place and we appreciate you sharing all this information and hearing it here first.
Yeah.
That's super, super cool. Yeah, thank you for working on this project. I have looked over some questions here, and you showed earlier that there are multiple places in Seahurst Park that have had restoration, but there's also one place in Seahurst Park that has not.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you know anything about that, about if there's a timeline or.
That's a great question. And I don't know. I actually think, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I've only actually visited the beach a couple times. I plan to visit it many, many more times. But I think that wall is actually around your science center. Is it not?
Yeah, because as you were talking, I went, oh, I failed to mention. The Environmental Science Center is in Burien, Washington, and we are lucky to actually have our building in Seahurst Park.
Right.
If you've been to that park, you may not know we are there because you cannot see our building from the parking lot. It is past the restrooms, down the gravel path, and it is right near where there is a wall and a pavilion, and right next to the Marine Science Tech Center. So there are 2 buildings there.
Okay, got it.
So there is still some armoring that you can see there that looks like it doesn't affect the tides as they come in and out. And that would be near our building before this next site that we are looking at that has not been restored.
That's right. Yeah. So I wonder that because there are some buildings there, they might be reserving restoration for kind of a big effort that can actually save or make sure that the buildings are basically safe and that sort of thing. And it's actually a really very small location of armoring right there. And I think, is it true that there's even a creek that goes through it? Is
There,
that, am I
there is
thinking
a
of the
creek.
right location there?
There is a creek close to our building that used to go out
Yeah.
into Puget Sound, but has been, I believe, routed underneath that pavilion and now serves as the creek that goes into the salmon fish ladder next to the Marine Tech Center.
Ah,
And that's
yes,
that's
that's
a
what I'm thinking
permitted
of.
hatchery where students are helping rear
Mhm.
salmon and release them. So they're imprinting on that stream as the way to come back in.
Oh,
So I
that's
think
so
it's a
cool.
little
I'm
further.
learning something here too.
I think it's a little further down, and I'm also recalling there have been some large landslides a little north, so that may also be why some of that work
Right.
hasn't been done.
So one of the things I want to look at specifically with these data is to see whether if you have a smaller region that is still armored, if you have surrounding areas that are natural and unarmored, if that means that that small section of armored is actually not as impactful. So instead of having large pieces of armor basically surrounding the shoreline, whether even if we have just a small area of armor and that's surrounded by more natural areas, if that still lessens the impact of the armoring on the ecosystem. So I don't know about that armor though, whether it's specifically whether it will be coming down or anything.
I think
I do see a question here. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it's in line. I'm looking at a question from Ed about, are there any cooperative efforts with private landowners and shoreline property that is armored?
There certainly are. I was just going to stop sharing my screen. I don't know if that's better or not, because then I can see the chat also. So yes, we actually, a lot of our sites are private landowners or are on private land. And we do have some areas where we have monitored locations and we actually have to go through their property in order to do that. And so I'm personally very interested in the question of whether armoring restoration and whether the effects of armoring itself are actually affected by whether it has occurred, whether the location is on private or public land. So I think that, you know, enjoying our beaches and that sort of thing is wonderful. But of course, it's going to affect a little bit about the fact some aspects of the restoration, sometimes positively. So I'm curious to see whether that actually is going to cause a difference in our data, whether that the restorations happen on private versus public land. I think that's a great question. So you can, yeah, private landowners, if you own area by a shoreline, you can get that, there are avenues to work with restoration efforts to actually remove your armor there, and then we can come in and measure it.
Exciting. Yeah, I'm trying to think off the top of my head if it's King Conservation District that has a really great program for people. And a lot of these programs are built in through grants. You know, so sometimes you can have work done that is paid for and sometimes it's not.
Yes.
But I think a lot of it, the first part is contacting somebody to come out and assess the land to figure out what the next
exactly exactly. And King Conservation District is a partner that we've worked with before in order to do some of our sampling and everything. I'm seeing one question here that is in a different location about the logs and whether they can also act as armoring. And that's a great question, and they absolutely can. And sometimes logs are actually fixed in place with chains and that sort of thing, so that they actually stay and retain the sediment there. So yes, definitely logs can be used as a more natural alternative to something like riprap or seawalls.
Great. Well, Simone, thank you so much for sharing this information. I think,
of course,
yeah, it's a very special place, and it's nice to learn more about what's happening. And I definitely encourage some people to check out the website that is very interactive, because you can go on there and see what studies have been done in different places and what kinds. And I want to see the new rollout. So thank you for giving us a sneak peek, and all
you're welcome.
Information.
And thank you so much for having me here. And yeah, check out the website for sure, because we've put a lot of effort into it recently, and we'd love your feedback too. So Yeah, thank you so much.
Great. And hopefully we can do this again next year and then find out some more information that's going on. Great. Thank you.
Yes.
Well, as I said, we are having 2 speakers at these sessions, and our second speaker is going to be Kelly Steffen. If you are familiar with the Environmental Science Center, then you may already know Kelly. She recently stepped into the role, however, of Grants and Programs Manager. Since 2015, Kelly has helped hundreds of students, maybe even thousands at this point, I don't know, test local water quality, learn about the plants and wildlife that rely on these aquatic systems, and she's also helped empower them with ways that they can make a difference in their daily lives. Now her work continues virtually with our Salmon Heroes program, and she's going to share some of these projects and ways that you can contribute to some exciting data projects. So please welcome Kelly Steffen.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carly. And thank you for having me here to talk about our program. Go ahead and get that started there. Just wanted to start off by showing a picture of me in my natural habitat by a salmon-bearing stream, teaching water quality to students. Hopefully we'll get back out there someday soon. But yeah, as Carly mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit about our programs here at Environmental Science Center and what we are doing with our students and all of the amazing things that they are involved in. So at Environmental Science Center, our mission is to promote environmental stewardship and academic achievement through science-based education. And we have been doing that since 2000. So we celebrated 20 years this year. And our programs really focus on, letting nature teach, getting people outside and using nature to inspire and encourage stewardship. And we have programs all the way from tiny tots to adults. And tonight I'm going to focus on our school-based programs. And so not only these programs emphasize stewardship components, but we also are really trying to get students involved in community science approaches, appropriate for their age levels, to help them make big impacts in their communities. So tonight I'm going to share just a few of these. So we have our Beach Heroes program, which is for K through 3rd graders. We have our Salmon Heroes program, which is for 4th through 8th grades. And then we also work with a number of teen leaders, both in middle school and in high school, doing some restoration work and other projects around South King County. So our Beach Heroes program, like I mentioned, is for the young kids, the kindergarten through 3rd grade. And we are really focused on getting these students and introducing them to the nearshore environment. Sometimes it's their first exposure to a low tide. We bring them out to Seahurst Beach and teach them ways that they can safely explore and protect this habitat. This program takes place in the spring. Usually April through June, depending on when the good tides are. And it is a 2-part program. So we have both a classroom component and a field study at Seahurst Beach, which is usually 2 hours in length. And then in the classroom, we use a number of amazing animal models and images and actions to introduce the students to the organisms. And then they also have an opportunity to make their field guides. And we introduce our stewardship messaging. So they are prepped on how to explore the beach safely when they come out to explore. And these field studies, these 2-hour field studies, like I mentioned, a lot of them, it is the first time that they're really seeing these low tide organisms and introduced to them. And so we work in small groups with our naturalists and really focus on student-led discoveries. And so we're talking about our stewardship messaging. We use the word STARS, teaching them to step carefully, remove only trash, and a number of different messages. And we do incorporate a trash pickup during the field studies, so the students are being active stewards of the land. Now, one thing that we've noticed over the years, and we've been doing this program for almost as long as ESC has been around, is that a number of our second and third grade students actually participate in the program when they're in kindergarten and first grade. And so we wanted to sort of develop an in-depth option for these older students that are doing the Beach Heroes to allow them to dive deeper into the beach, maybe interact with the organisms in new ways, use different tools, talk about the ways that scientists or other community groups like what Simone just talked about are monitoring the beach, and really just help them, connect with the beach at a higher level. So last spring, we wrote the curriculum to do this program and started planning for this community science advanced option for our older students. And the program involves 3 different stations that the students would rotate through. So the first one is a transect station, recording presence or absence of 12 main species. And these are the 12 animals that we focus on with our Beach Heroes program. So it's just continuing that knowledge. And then we also have a swath survey where we're letting them use some cool tools, measuring the size of different animals. So they're either looking for dog whelks and sea stars, or another group might be looking for limpets and crab molts. So just a little time for them to go through a small chunk of land and really measure and count these organisms. And then our last station is a scientific illustration station. And so this is an opportunity for them to calm down, focus in, and connect really in more detail with one particular animal. And they can choose whatever they want, but it really allows them to focus in and observe some of the cool details that these animals have on the beach and do their illustration. Now, we did plan to pilot this program last spring. Unfortunately, our season did get canceled as the school switched to home learning. And so while it was put on hold for a little bit, but we did have the opportunity in August to pilot the program. We had a group, some youth from Partners in Employment were coming out to the beach for a program. And so we went ahead and set up our 3 stations, and the youth were able to go through and help us out, give us some feedback on our different stations. And we taking the lessons that we learned at this pilot run, as well as lessons that we've been learning transferring all of our programs to virtual world. We are ready to run this program this coming spring in 2021 with second and third grade students. So we'll have to keep you updated on the progress on how that goes. So that's the program for our younger elementary. And then we have our Salmon Heroes. So our Salmon Heroes are 4th through 8th graders. We do have a few high school groups that participate, but mostly 4th through 8th grade, so upper elementary and middle school. And this is focused on salmon, focused on watershed health and salmon recovery, and helping them become better stewards of these river habitats, these watersheds that are local to them. And it, like Beach Heroes, is a multi-part experience. And so we have a classroom presentation that we do with the students. They come out for a 3-hour field study at a local river. And then we follow up with a classroom session. And the field studies at the rivers, whereas our Beach Heroes takes place only at Seahurst Beach, our Salmon Heroes takes place at salmon streams throughout South King County. We have 4 main sites that we use in both the Green Duwamish and the Cedar River watershed. And so we really try to bring the students to their local watershed and really make it the local connection relevant to them. And one of the things, main parts of their field study is the water quality testing. So the students are testing to see if the water is cold, clean and clear for the salmon. And they're using Lamont kits. So these are the low cost Earth Force kits. And we also to use those to measure things like phosphates, nitrates, pH. We also have a dissolved oxygen meter that we've been using and some larger turbidity tubes. So just kind of introducing some fun tools for the students to use. And we really do make it a student-focused process. So we want the students collecting the water samples. They're doing all of the testing, following the instructions, analyzing the results, determining what the results are, if they're healthy for salmon or if they're not. And then they, as scientists, get to share their data. And so we've been sharing our data with the EarthEcho International Water Challenge website. And if you'll bear with me, I'm going to switch screens to actually show you the website. So here I'm at the website now. This is a website, it's called MonitorWater.org. And it's a really cool website founded by Philippe Cousteau Jr., so the grandson of Jacques Cousteau. And their whole emphasis there is really to test, share, and protect. So we have our students testing the water quality. They're sharing the water quality on this database. And this is an international, people from 146 countries have participated. Anybody can participate if you create an account. Or if you wanted to, you can just click on browsing the results. So you can see each one of these dots here are water tests that people have done. And I'm going to go ahead and zoom in to Washington. Oops. So you can see the Puget Sound here. There are quite a few sample sites that have been done. And right now we're showing pH, but if you wanted to, you could also look at oxygen. So these red dots here show areas of low oxygen. But yeah, so this is, and each one of these sites, if you click on the data, it will actually pull up all of the data. And I pulled up a site that I know that we've put in a lot of water data for. So it actually goes back 2 years and you can see the pH at this site or the temperature. It was very cold one year. So we have a lot of cold water temperatures recorded when we were out with the students that year. But this is a great website just to kind of go through and browse and see all of the fun things that you can do. I'm going to go back to the presentation. And so because of the amount of data that we've entered, we've become a water challenge partner with EarthEcho International. And in September of 2019, we were actually invited to a special event, World Water Monitoring Day. It was held at the Cedar River in Renton, and we did it in partnership with the Nooksack Salmon Enhancement Association, so NC, which is located up in Bellingham, and they have a similar salmon education program up there. And so NC came down, and then if you can see in the middle there, we've got Philippe Cousteau Jr. came out. It was a regular Salmon Heroes field trip for the students, but they also got involved in some restoration work, pulling ivy around the river. So great fun. And then EarthEcho has also created a special portal for us that we can share with our teachers. And so let me zoom in on this map. So each one of these blue dots are dots where we've collected water samples or students have collected water samples. You can see there's quite a few dots there. There are 4 main sites. We've added quite a few this current year. And one of the reasons for that is just because with the virtual programming that we're doing, we can go to actually more, we can go to smaller, more local streams to the schools to really help that personalized connection. And so we've added quite a few sites this past year. Another thing that EarthEcho has done for us is they have created some graphs, some simple graphs that we can share with the teachers that show like the data over the years at our three main sites. So we've got temperature. There's that cold year at Mary Olson Farm there. You can see the water temperature down there, but lots of oxygen in the water. We have turbidity, pH. And then the cool thing is that the teachers can actually, these are just screenshots, so they can scroll down at this portal and find their school and click on the school, and it'll pull up the data that all of their students collected and have all the details from that day, including any extra notes that we enter in. So it's a great way for them to kind of make it a personalized approach and use that data in the classroom. And the students love the fact that their data is being shared on this worldwide database. So yeah, so like I mentioned, we're doing a virtual Salmon Heroes this year. So we are not able to bring the students to the streams, but we are working in small pairs to bring the stream to the students. So we have an iPad that we use to live stream our classes, right, using either Zoom or Microsoft Teams, whichever the schools are using, to the students' homes. And so we're still doing our water quality data testing as we are getting the students involved. And hopefully someday we will make it back out into the streams with them. And then I have a few more minutes. Oh, it has another picture of them doing the streams and the interactions. I have a few more minutes. I wanted just to talk briefly about what some of our teens are doing. So these are our teen leaders. This is a middle school group that did some storm drain stenciling around their school and on their school grounds. So that's one action project that we got our students involved in. We also do a lot of restoration work. This is at New Start High School, Burien White Center area. And this is the rain garden that was installed on their school campus. We've also installed pollinator plants gardens at a middle school campus. We've done other work with New Start High School, just a lot of great restoration work with those students. And then not only are we doing stuff on school campuses, but we're also bringing students to us. These are big picture middle school students that come to Seahurst Park and are involved in some invasive plant pulling or native plant plantings, variety of restoration work. So really getting them involved. And these students come out, typically they come out throughout the whole year, once a month, and get involved in this project. So it's sort of a long-term project and commitment with them. So those are all of the things that we do with our students. And I just wanted to share this STREAMS acronym is our stewardship acronym for our Salmon Heroes program. So we have beach stars and then salmon streams. But these are all things that you can do too. So I wanted to finish off with this. And we always, when we're teaching this to our students and sharing with them, the biggest thing is really that last S, the share what you learned. And we have that on both of our acronyms because we really want to emphasize like going out, like maybe if you learned something new tonight about what our students are doing or what you could do to help out and become involved in some community science projects, to share what you learn and get others involved too. So, and with that, I will thank you for letting me share about some of the cool things that we're doing. And I don't know if there's any questions. I might go ahead and stop sharing the screen so I can see.
Thank you, Kelly. That was just a taste of all the things that you have done to help us out here at the Environmental Science Center. And there is a question on this virtual format you're using now with Salmon Heroes, and what is maybe one of the most challenging things you've found throughout this adaptation time?
Well, I think like most of us in this field, like we're environmental educators because we want to go away from technology and just be out in the woods. And unfortunately, that's not where we're at right now. And so it's been a great learning curve, learning video editing. I think the biggest challenge to making this successful was getting good connectivity out in the wild, because we really want to bring those wild places to the students still, even because they're not able to get there in person. And a lot of those places, you don't have a lot of good cell phone coverage, which is a good thing, except when you're trying to Zoom a live classroom. So, but we've been making it work, and it's been great fun. And the students have really responded well to it. I think better than we anticipated. So it's been nice to see all that we've done with Salmon Heroes, and we're really looking forward to doing the same thing with our younger students, our beach heroes.
Yeah, and there is not that interaction in the field where you can see the faces as they light up, like, it used to happen, but we are still getting thank yous. We're getting the thank yous digitally now, but it just goes to show that the messaging is still there, the action steps are still there, and empowerment is, this overwhelming underlying thing that is resonating with students. So thank you for that work, and for making us realize we can all scoop our poop and clean up the storm drains.
It's always a favorite with the fourth graders.
Yes, storm drains are a thing that we talk a lot about in our programs. It's not a fancy word, but it is a thing that is throughout our community and is one of the ways that you all can make a difference. If you're going for walks in the parks around your house, you may notice more that the storm drains are getting tons of leaves all around them now. So if you want to put on some gloves and put them into a bag and put them in the compost, that little act can make a big bit of difference from clogging all these drains up and having all the trash go down. So if you're just feeling like, what can I really do? That's one simple thing that we can all do. And share what you learn, like we're doing today, or tonight, or whenever you're tuning into this thing. Yeah, so we're seeing lots of great information in the chat, lots of accolades and thank yous. So we appreciate all your work. And yes, everyone's saying clean the storm drains, which is really, really nice. So I want to thank you for sharing the work that you're doing and just sharing your passion. I mean, that's the main thing. I think through all these environmental education programs, we come to find we're sharing a passion with each other. And it's great to see that we're all working together, even if it's in a virtual environment a lot now. So thank you for that. And thank you, everyone who is joining us. We thank you for sharing your thoughts and your concerns in such valuable ways. Most importantly, we thank you for being a steward of your watershed. Simply tuning into this shows that. So thank you for all that you're doing. We hope that you tune in again, because this is the first part of our 3-part series. We will continue next week on the same day at the same time to discuss plants for the future. And we plan to record these and also put them up, so in case you missed some of it or you can't make one of them, that you can still take part later. So again, thank you all. And as we've been doing at the Environmental Center, we kind of just wave off. So appreciate it. Thank you for your help.